Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of the Health After 30 podcast. Today, I'm joined with Jenny Powers, and we're talking about aligning modern life with evolutionary health. A huge topic, I feel, that's on today's plate, not only because we have one thing to think about, but we are constantly having new things that we need to think about. But what I'm really excited about is that evolutionary process of where we've come from and where we are now. So this is the conversation we're going to have. So Jenny, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited for our conversation.
And congratulations on your book as well. It's a massive
Thank
achievement. You co-authored The Origin of Being. Would you like to just kind of introduce the topic a little bit? Perhaps tell us how you got there, just so we can get a feel for what the evolutionary process even is and what it means for modern life.
Yeah, well, so the book is called On the Origin of Being. So it's kind of paying homage to Charles Darwin's On the Origin of Species. And then it's understanding the science of evolution to enhance your quality of life. And kind of what the book boils down to, all animals were evolving as humans were evolving. We changed and adapted very slowly over time, and our environment kind of stayed the same or changed very slowly with us, and we changed with it. But then hit the agricultural revolution, the industrial revolution, now the information age. Our environment started changing so fast, but our bodies kept kind of being the same. We have the same DNA, we have the same traits, we have the same needs. And now there's this huge mismatch between what our environment provides us, or if it provides us what we need at all, and what our biology needs. And so that's called the mismatch hypothesis. And so when, you can think about many different parts of human life that you're like, oh yeah, we have changed a lot, even in just the last 50 years. As to how differently from how we used to live. So in this first book, we talk about sleep, the importance of sleep, and how it's just evolutionarily conserved. Of course, nutrition is a huge one, work and rest, and then our connection with nature. And then we have other books coming out that kind of dive into deeper topics like social issues and cultural issues.
Yeah, it's definitely a huge topic which can't be covered in one book. There are a lot of add-ons in life that we need to improve our quality of life.
Exactly.
Yeah. On the origin of being, I guess when we think about these pillars of health, sleep, nutrition, stress and anxiety, would you put that into a category of its own?
Well, I think stress and anxiety is associated with all of those things. I feel like if you're not eating well, it shows up in your mental state. If you're working too hard or not resting enough, if you stay inside all the time, I think all of those things manifest in mental, not only physical distress, but also mental distress. We're going so fast, accelerate, go do this, do that, do everything, succeed. That's just a recipe for stress.
Yeah. So nutrition, sleep, connection with nature. I guess these are the largest three things.
And work.
Yeah. And so how does our modern life, the way that this drastic change has happened, we've stayed the same, these things have increased. How does our modern life misalign with our primal needs of what we needed back in the beginning?
So I think before I go back to that, I think that through my journey, what I have realized, we have all of this stress in life, and we have all of these things that we're worried about, and we have this pressure, external pressure, societal pressure, especially as moms, as women who work, as women in general. There are all these external pressures put on us. But as I was researching this book, what I realized is a lot of the things that I struggle with, feeling like I had to be perfect, my worth was measured by my achievements. When I started feeling depressed and when I had anxiety and when I couldn't do the work that I wanted to do, I took it as a moral failing. And I think a lot of people do too. I can't get in shape. I can't eat well. I'm a failure. It's all about me. But really what I think is important to think about any of the other, like the little pillars, is that, we have this mismatch in our environment. Our society compels a certain way of life. And so we don't necessarily have control. We do have control, but when we find ourselves at these crossroads of, I can't do this, it's really important to realize it's not our fault.
It's not your fault.
Right? It's not our fault. Like, we are responsible for changing it, but the state of where we are in the world and how these stressors impact our health and our in our mental health and physical health, it's not because we failed. It's because there's this big gap in between what our bodies need, our bodies, our minds, our spirits, our souls, everything, and what our environment, our modern society can give us. And so once I recognized that, it actually made it easier for me to start making changes, because once you stop blaming yourself, it's easier to make changes. And it's also easier if you're looking outward at like, oh, well, of course I'm not getting enough sleep. Like I have to get up at 5:30 every morning to go to work. You know, that's a societal outside pressure. You know, you go to a grocery store and 90% of the food is processed, you know, and packaged. I don't feel good. You know, I've been eating all this processed food, but this is what's available to me. It's not my fault that this is what's available to me. With work and rest, I mean, I think people realize that work is important, but work, how hard you work and what you do and how you succeed and how much money you have isn't a measure of your worth, because, you know, our ancestors didn't accumulate wealth. Being in nature, I mean, I think, you know, we're the only species on the planet that doesn't live in our natural habitat. Humans are amazing because we're intelligent and creative and we can like overcome some of these obstacles. But it was really helpful for me to see, okay, it's not coming from, a lot of these problems aren't coming from the inside, they're coming from the outside. It's my job to kind of change them and work and try to make myself feel better. But the change is not going to come from above. The change is going to come from like this grassroots kind of movement of holistic health and functional health and things like that.
Which is the essence of evolution, right? This internal change. Like that's, you know, if we think about birds having beaks to get a specific food, it was like their internal desire to want to be able to get something and within them changing. Is that correct? Is that how evolution works? From
A little bit. So how evolution works, when your cells divide, copying the DNA and duplicating the DNA is always a difficult process. It's never perfect, right? And when you make your egg cells and sperm cells, it's all even more complicated because there's lots of recombination and things like that happen. So whenever there is recombination and duplication, there are errors that are made. And those errors can either be beneficial, like this particular genetic mutation in this gene makes those beaks bigger and more able to do that. So it could be beneficial, it could be neutral, it could be something that doesn't change anything about that animal's physiology, or it could be detrimental. And so then those animals are born, and the one that had the mutation that made their beak ever so slightly bigger had a survival advantage over these other ones, reproduce and pass that trait on to the next generation. So that is kind of where, you know, the neutral one might still be okay, but eventually the ones that have that bigger beak are gonna outcompete the neutral one. And the one that has a detrimental mutation, that one's not going to survive to pass on its genes. So when you think about evolution and survival of the fittest, I think a lot of people have a misconception about what that means. To be a fitness in the evolutionary sense is to be able to procreate. You leave your genes for the next generation. Fitness is how you get to the point where you reproduce and you pass your genes on.
Pass your genes on.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I completely had survival of the fittest.
Well, a lot of people have that misconception. I think a lot of people use it to justify certain things, sometimes pretty bad things. And really it's, did you survive long enough to pass your genes on? If an adaptation in your genetic code enables you or the animal to have a survival advantage, then it's more likely to pass its genes on. So over time, you know, an accumulation of all these small little adaptations of our genes, you know, that makes a big change. Like they're really small incremental changes, but when you look at at the end result over hundreds of thousands, millions of years, it's a big change because that little survival.
And so how does this relate to humans when we are living in a world which is going a lot faster than we're clearly evolving?
What's interesting is that it takes a really, really long time for a trait to evolve and spread to an entire population. And if you think about how many people there are in this world, you know, some people don't even know if we're even evolving anymore, because when you have to evolve, you have a challenge and you have to adapt to that challenge in order to survive and procreate. But at least for most people in this world, survival like in the rawest sense of the word, if you live or die, is not an issue anymore, right? We have such amazing technology, you know, and that's a good thing, I think, that we don't have to worry about survival. But when we start behaving in ways that, you know, we have this long evolutionary history, sometimes, you know, tying back to the very first cells of life. There's some traits in the very first cells of life that we still have. And so that's what our bodies are used to. So for instance, with sleep, circadian rhythms are one of the earliest traits of the early cells, because circadian rhythms will prep your body to respond to changes in the environment, right? So for instance, the cyanobacteria, you know, they would go up to the surface in the ocean to get sunlight to do photosynthesis. But then they would realize, well, we shouldn't do our cell division. We shouldn't multiply when we're in the sun because sunlight can cause mutations. So they would know, okay, at this certain time, the sun goes down. They would, that's when they would start reproducing, because that's where the survival advantage is. If you have fewer mutations, external mutations, you're going to survive better. And circadian rhythms regulate hormones, regulate digestion, regulate your sleep, you know, your alertness throughout the day, your activity levels. And so what happens when you're living in touch with nature, like our hunter-gatherer ancestors, they're very in tune with the cycle of day and night. So every morning they get bright sunlight. It's time to, you know, get rid of this hormone, like let's downregulate melatonin. Let's upregulate a little cortisol so we can wake and do our thing. And then they get bright sunlight. And then as the sun goes down, they get less and less and less sunlight. And when the sun goes down, we only had firelight or moonlight. And so the sun going down was a signal to our bodies to start getting ready for rest and repair. And then, you know, we'd go to sleep and we wake up when the sun came up and we'd have bright sunlight in the morning. Now, if you think about it, we wake up, we turn on all the lights inside. It's not near as bright as the sun is. And light is the trigger that resets your circadian rhythms. When is it going to produce the hormones, you know, to help us digest? When is it going to produce the hormones to help us sleep? When is it going to produce the hormones to help us be more alert? It doesn't have any way of resetting and becoming like cyclical. And so I think having all of our hormones out of whack, of course, is going to result in disease. And so it's not necessarily how long you sleep, but it's how regulated you are in terms of resetting your circadian rhythms in the morning, getting bright light, and then making sure you don't get a lot of bright light, blue light in the evening. Get off your screens, get different bulbs, wear blue blocking glasses, change the things on your devices, you know, so the redshift, all of those things have a biological purpose. And that's because blue light, in the spectrum of light, blue light is the one wavelength of light that penetrated the deepest in the oceans. So that is what our circadian rhythms. So it's very easy. I mean, I think to get bright light in the morning and to reduce our light at night, I think that's a pretty easy thing that we can do. It's just a matter of deciding to do it and also not letting the distractions of the modern world get in the way. Binge watching or staying up, you know, too late, staying inside all day, never getting outside.
These are all common things for the modern day person, not intentional necessarily.
Right. No.
Just because it's technology, as you said, you know, the information revolution has kind of spewed things out really fast, whether it's being addicted to our phones or scrolling or watching things on TV or working or whatever it is that's keeping us up so late and us awake with all of this light.
Yeah.
But
our bodies aren't giving us the signals that we're tired because melatonin production hasn't started yet, because it's still, your body still thinks it's daytime. So I really do think that once people, I mean, we're hoping that with this book, you know, we kind of spell out, like with circadian rhythms, how they evolved. And then how can we, you know, we try to spell out easy ways to kind of reconnect with the hunter-gatherer in us, because we still pretty much have hunter-gatherer genes, and how to bring a little bit of that way of life into the modern world. Because I think a lot of people romanticize being a hunter-gatherer and stuff, but we really don't want to go back there.
It was a hard life.
It was hard, rewarding and hard, but also, you know, the modern world is amazing, you know, all of the technology. Yeah.
I heard something recently which said, you know, we think about the indigenous of of a land or, even of Earth. We don't see it because we live in a modern life, but we are still the Indigenous people living on this earth. And with all the traits that we have, trying to match with the modern life, I think the circadian rhythm, that's a massive one that we all face challenges with. But something that I see in clinic, I worked with weight loss often, and this is something that I see all the time. And it's what you said before as well. It's not your fault. There's some things, biological, evolutionary things, which keep us wanting to eat more, having to go for glucose or liking certain foods or just not being able to shift weight. I would love to go into like the nutrition space and how this has changed, because with modern world and how much food we have, that's, completely at our fingertips at any time. Where I live, you actually have an app and in 20 minutes, someone's delivering food to your door. And, obesity is an epidemic. It's on the rise. Not to say that, being big isn't healthy, but it's just a general thing that we are going towards. This primal, the movement that we used to do is not there anymore. Can you just talk about perhaps how nutrition has also changed for us?
Sure. Well, it's interesting you say, wanting to eat sugar. As we evolved, especially in the human lineage, our brains started getting bigger, and our brains utilize glucose as its primary energy source. The rest of our bodies can utilize, most of the rest of our bodies can utilize, fats and glucose and other things, but our brains need glucose, the evolution of a bigger brain. So they say like the evolution, human evolution and nutrition are intimately tied together, because in order for an adaptation to last and give survival advantage to somebody, you had to have the nutritional resources to support that adaptation. And so our adaptation of getting larger brains required us to get a lot of sugar and glucose. So what we did is we started changing the different kinds of foods that we ate. When we were more like our primate ancestors, we ate a lot of fruits and things like that, but we needed to get more nutrient-dense food. So we started eating more animal products. We started eating like tubers and things like that are really complex carbohydrates. We also started processing the food, which means, we ground it up so it could digest faster, so we could get the glucose to our brains faster, right? And so processing food, like soaking it, cooking it, all of those things, these are all things that we used to do as hunter-gatherers. And so processing food isn't bad, but over-processing, ultra-processing food is bad. Because as, we ate all these new foods, we didn't just strip out all the parts and just have the sugar, protein, oil. We didn't just, and then we made, nowadays we strip out to those three ingredients and then we push them together and make new food that we never used to eat before. Hunter-gatherers never stripped the nutrients from their food. So if they ate tubers or greens, they ate the skins, they ate the seeds, they ate all of those things together. So our bodies are used to digesting, these carbohydrates in the context of all of these other things. When we ate an animal, we ate, tip to tail. We ate the organ meat, we ate the connective tissue, all of these things. We didn't just take the muscle meat out and eat that. What's interesting is because we're smart, we started meeting these nutritional challenges by learning how to process food. We did not have to necessarily adapt our digestive system. We could just say, this is a food that we can't eat right now as it is. So we don't have to adapt to eat it. We can just say, oh, well, if I grind it up and cook it, then I can eat it and the nutrients come to me. So we were able to meet these challenges with our intelligence. So if you fast forward to the Industrial Revolution and the advent of processed food, that is actually in response to a survival challenge as well. Because mass producing food, there used to be and there still is, but not to the same extent, food hunger. And so being able to mass produce food, make it stable so you can ship it to people, have it be really nutrient dense, not necessarily in terms of vitamins and fiber and minerals and stuff like that, but the basic building blocks. So I feel like processed food, the ultra processing, it kind of grew exponentially too. Like we started processing food and made it industrial, but now I think we've overshot, because now we're processing the food so much that the food that we eat is, like I said, they smash them together and add a whole bunch of other stuff, artificial flavors, artificial colors, preservatives, things like that. And then they say, here, this is the food that will nourish you. And it's really not nourishing us the same way.
No.
But we, like you said, we still have these biological drives. Like if a hunter-gatherer stumbled upon, and was able to harvest a honeycomb, it tastes good and it's like pure glucose for your brain. So now, when we're, there's candy right there, we have that same dopamine response, which is the reward response, because your brain wants to reward you for giving it what it needs. So that's kind of tied into how, our evolutionary biology sometimes forces us or compels us to behave in a certain way. Whereas, 100,000 years ago, it wasn't an issue. But now we have abundant food, abundant sugar all the time. And so the modern world is giving us this food in abundance, and we're eating it and having the same reactions, and we just can't stop.
Yeah. And I think, what you mentioned about the agricultural revolution and the industrial revolution, it was all to help us. It's to make life easier. It's to help us live. And even the information revolution, this is all, I guess, in essence, to make things more comfortable for our living situation.
The agricultural revolution did not enhance our life. It actually made it worse.
Okay.
Yeah, because we went from being hunter-gatherers, we ate such a diverse amount of food, to agriculture where we'd eat like one staple. So we stopped eating diverse amounts of food. We started, now we have to farm. So rather than, running, going around and doing all kinds of different activities to harvest our food, we had backbreaking labor. We also, we planted our seeds and then we had to wait to harvest it. So we can talk about the work in a minute, but that's how it's kind of how our outlook on work changed. We came together in larger and larger groups. So pathogens, communicable diseases, conflict. You were able to have babies faster because you would wean the babies after a little bit of time and then have more babies. So this is, and you needed more people to work the land, so you needed to procreate more, so you'd have a big family, so you could eat the land. But then there's this feedback cycle, because if you have more people, you have to have more food, and if you're growing more food, you have to have more people. So we needed to have agriculture, and then we needed to make more food, and all of this stuff. So it's kind of interesting how, and it wasn't necessarily until the advent of like vaccinations and modern healthcare and modern sanitation that our life expectancy rose because of the limitations of agriculture that what we had. And agriculture, farming, we would select for certain kinds of fruit. So we'd select for food that had less fiber in it. So, our fruits have changed over time. The fat content of the meat is totally like that, especially the omega-3s and omega-6s.
Yeah.
The fat content of our meat has changed because of how we've, cultivated our meat. It's just, I'm hoping that people realize like there's an evolutionary reason why we require certain foods. And there was an evolutionary reason why we started needing to make more food, and how it kind of became this cycle, and then how this industrialization and this ultra processing of food kind of got out of control.
It has got completely out of control. And I often wonder, like, I guess the next big question with all of this, and I would love to also talk about work, but you said it so nicely, when an animal gets taken out of its natural environment, it gets sick.
Exactly.
And, this is what we are experiencing. We live in contained environments, not only our actual environment, but also, I guess, the mental state in which we communicate, the isolation we experience, or the social contacts that we have. This is all impacting us. So I guess when I look at our overall health, what does this mean for the individual trying to navigate, this modern life with all of these primal instincts? What does this mean for us if we know that when we're taken out of our natural environment, which we don't know any different now?
Right.
What does that mean?
Well, I think it starts with, in order to help navigate that, hunter-gatherers were very in touch with their body's needs. They were very in touch. They were very in the present moment. And that has a lot to do with their outlook on life, with how they worked, satisfy their needs, and then they stopped and they rested. If they were hungry, they'd eat. If they were lonely, they'd go find somebody. And I feel like in the modern world, people are not connected to their actual body's needs because there's all this noise surrounding us. Eating 3 times a day. That's kind of an external cultural thing. So I think starting with, mindfulness and being more present and learning and actually remembering how to listen to our bodies. And to honor that, because sometimes people get signals from their bodies and they're like, nope, I got to work longer. I can't stop. Or I'm so tired. Oh, but I need to watch this one more. How to listen to our actual needs. And then we need to relearn how to honor those needs and not be just swept away, in this modern culture. So I think that's really the first place to start, because that will help your sleeping. That helps everything that you need to do. All of these pillars, being present and knowing what your body needs will actually help you fulfill those needs in a better way.
This is really difficult though, because I feel for some things it can be easy, but we're so bombarded with what society tells us as, women, getting back into the workforce. Women are cyclical creatures. We have this monthly rhythm, and if you feel it, that there's some times of the month where you feel like you're shooting hoops and winning, and there's other times where you don't want to be doing as much. But still, we are in a very male-dominated society where it's like, get up 9 to 5, do the job, perform. So even if we want to listen to our bodies, we still have the force of not being able to do that, I feel. So I totally agree that awareness is one thing, although it's not necessarily always easy. It's very simple, but it's not easy to do.
No, and I totally agree with you, because a lot of people who are talking about, in the future, we're going to have 15-hour work weeks because our technology is going to be so advanced that everything's going to get done for us and we'll have a lot more time to enjoy our leisure and all this stuff. But trying to stop working is one of the hardest things. At least especially in my personal journey, it's been easier for me to change my sleeping habits. It's been easier to change my nutrition habits. It's been really difficult to change my working habits because of the modern, it's how we tie our worth with how much we work and how much we succeed. And the social pressure of not appearing lazy. I need to make money because money is how we get things. Money is how we get status, And so we feel like, oh my gosh, I have to keep working because I need to be able to pay this bill. Hunter-gatherers didn't live with very much and their needs were easily met. In the modern world, we have these external needs placed upon us. The need to feel worthy, the need to have money, the need to have status, the need to have things. And so we really have to reevaluate our relationship with work and why we're working. Even if the research says working, more than 6 hours a day is, harmful to your health, people are going to ignore that and work 10-hour days anyway. So you're right. I think that's the hardest thing to do.
We've also lost contact with spiritual connection, nature connection. So how much did the spirit play a part with us being aligned with ourselves and with nature?
Well, I think that's what you said is exactly it. I think being aligned with nature, when we were hunter-gatherers, we weren't separate from nature. We were a part of nature. We were a part of the web. And it's not like we were tree huggers, but we treated the world around us sustainably because we recognized its importance in our life. And so our ancestors had respect for the animals that they killed to eat. Those animals had spirits. Those animals gave their life to feed us. They have this wonder and awe about the world around them, which I think we're lacking in the modern world. And I think that being in nature, being connected with nature is the source of awe. And having that kind of spiritual, just like, wow, awe, where you feel like you're part of something larger than yourself, that causes you to feel more humility, more patience, more kindness. So I really feel like that disconnection with our spirit is partly because we're not paying attention to it, but partly because we're not connected with nature anymore. If you take two groups and one goes for a walk in the city and one goes for a walk on a nature trail, and then they come back and test their cortisol levels, which one's going to have higher cortisol? The cars are bombarding you, and you have smells, and you have so many things to look at, and you have to worry about, crossing the street and going in here. And when you're in nature, you kind of have this more relaxed
environment and reconnecting with nature. Like I hear, we all hear that going out in nature is good, disconnecting from the phone and reconnecting with nature. We hear these things, but when you understand it from an evolutionary point of view, I feel like it is somehow more impactful, and it makes it a bit more easier to grasp when you don't disconnect with the past of where we've come, but we start to just accept that we are still this and not trying to fight it somehow.
No, exactly. I think it's really important to realize that, we're not this isolated, we're on this continuum, and so it's not like, we can't go back there because we're so different. No, we've been a part of it all along. We've been a part of being of this world. We've evolved with all the creatures, all the plants, of this world. And it's just lately that we've severed our own connection. I think that'll also help with our sense of spirituality and sense of connection with humanity, not just with connection with nature. But we all came from the same place. We all have pretty much the same genes. We all have the same biological needs.
Yeah. And if we're experiencing illness, if we have mental health or presenting with physical symptoms of any said, disease, perhaps that's also the first place where we need to start looking. How is our connection with self? How is our connection with nature? How is our connection with spirit? That's I think that's the foundation. This is what's kind of the biggest light bulb for me in this conversation. This is the foundation of actually all health. It's a really beautiful thing.
I also think another thing that will really help, so recognizing this continuum, but this is what I was going to say. Recognizing also that these diseases of modernity, the obesity, heart disease, cancer, type 2 diabetes, the mental health issues, anxiety, depression, these are all new non-communicable diseases that we never used to suffer from. I was listening to one of your other podcasts and you were talking about menopause, and like people just expect it to be bad because we have this expectation now as we get older, we're going to have problems with our weight. As we get older, we're going to have problems with cholesterol. We're going to be at risk for obesity. When you get older, you get cancer. But none of these things, we've normalized those things. And because that's only been the condition of humanity for the last 50 years, and maybe starting to come along a little bit more, with the agriculture and industrial revolution and things like that. So accepting the fact that we're part of this continuum and connected to the earth and to everyone who came before us, but also to recognize that we have normalized these diseases and we've normalized treating them with drugs rather than saying, oh, well, if I just kind of went back and lived the way more in touch with my genes, more in touch with my primal self, a lot of these conditions can reverse themselves. And talking to women, who are after 30, a lot of these, it's never too late to start, changing your health and wellness, your lifestyle. But also a lot of people, think when I hit 50 and I start developing all these issues, then I'll change. Yeah. But all of these diseases start in your 20s and in your 30s. Yeah. And if you can get a jump on it and have these new habits just become a part of your life. Yeah. The earlier you can do it, the more longevity you'll have. So it's never too late though, because the human body is an amazing, it can heal itself. It is designed to heal itself. We just have to give it the tools to heal itself. And that includes sleeping, eating, working, and connecting the way that we need to, kind of these basic needs.
That's so beautiful. While I have you here, I want to touch on one last topic, because apart from sleeping well and reconnecting with nature and eating well and working in an efficient way, which is also good for us, something which I feel perhaps since the pandemic is this connection with people. And I was listening to a TED talk one time which said the one thing which is going to keep us healthy into old age is not necessarily what we eat or our lifestyle, but it's our connection with people. How important would you say connection, like, is this a big aspect of our evolution?
Totally. So actually our next book talks a lot about social groups and connection with your social group, child rearing, the relationship between the sexes. These are huge aspects because if you think about it, one person, 100,000 years ago, one person isn't going to survive on their own. We literally needed people to survive. We could not go through this life by ourselves. So our bodies became and our minds became more complex. Our brains evolved ways of dealing with different people and ways of integrating into groups and ways of recognizing, body language and just all the different social interactions that we have. Our brains really evolved to kind of match our needs in terms of survival. We needed more people. We needed to treat people in a certain way in order to stay a part of this group. We are now so individualized. You pull up your own bootstraps, you do it all by yourself, and you don't ask for help, and you don't need anybody. But, that might be true. We don't necessarily need people to survive, but we need people to thrive because it's hardwired in our brains. Like, we don't need other people to actually live today, but we need other people to actually make the day worthwhile and get that feedback, get that care, get that connection. And so I really hope that the next book will touch on a lot of those things and why we evolved a certain way, why we're in social groups. How did we used to raise our children? Mothering is kind of a symptom of how society itself is becoming more individualistic. We're compartmentalized here and there rather than like a web of interactions. And so, we've pulled moms out of this web of interaction to be on their own little island. And there's studies now, like, moms are the population in this world that have the most stress, have the most anxiety, really unhappy, and totally burned out. And it's because we don't have these connections and support of other people.
What do we start doing? Like, how do we even get to the point to start making that change? Because even when we want the change within ourselves, our surroundings don't necessarily reflect that.
Yeah, I agree. Actually, when I was writing this book, I felt really overwhelmed and got really depressed almost about how much there is to do. Like, how big is this gap? What are the things we need to do? And what I finally realized is the first thing I needed to do, and this is what I think the first thing, before you can go out and change work culture, before you can go out and change, the societal, connections, before you can go out and change the food industry, you have to take care of yourself first. You need to surround yourself with people so you have that connection of people who want to find a different way, who want to feel better. Because once you're in a state of health, then things open up. If you're tired and burnt out and depressed, and maybe, you have high cholesterol and you don't sleep well and, you're going through menopause and it's really hard to expect yourself to make these big changes external from yourself so other people can benefit is asking a lot of yourself. So you need to get yourself feeling good. I really feel like for anything like that, we have to take care of ourselves, but not in isolation. We have to take care of ourselves, find people who want to go for walks with you so you can talk.
I think it's the most important thing, actually. It's like surrounding yourself with like-minded people, because then you don't feel like you're fighting an uphill battle. You're like, this is the norm. And I think when that becomes the norm of how you want your life to be, then things become easier.
Mm-hmm. Totally. And I think if you're a group, you're stronger together. And I mean, it's having a group of people is why we survived. We're stronger together. But also, if you're not just an individual, if you're a group, other people will see this group thriving. Like, how can I be part of this group? You seem so happy. You seem so grounded. How did you do it?
Yeah. Oh, Jenny, I'm so inspired by your work that you do. I feel like out of everyone that I've talked to on the show, like, you really brought home the essence of improving quality of life, improving health, and improving our happiness in humanity. Like, this conversation really gives me hope, and it's also given me some really good insights on how to actively move forward, perhaps in my life, and hopefully for everyone else who's listening, they're also getting the same thing.
I'm really glad this resonates with you, but actually, I just researched, I rode the coattails of everyone, geneticists and anthropologists, and I brought all this stuff together. And really, it's nature and our evolution that prepared us and showed us how to live, right? So I feel like I'm helping people realize what's always been there. It's been there for millions of years. And so I'm hopefully just uncovering it for people and having people be curious about the why. Why do we need to regulate our circadian rhythms? Why should we eat whole foods? Well, because we evolved certain reasons for that.
Yeah, I think the why is when it actually kicks in. And when you can connect that why with perhaps the intentions that you have in your life, perhaps to live a long, healthy life, which is pain-free, or to keep up with your grandkids or whatever it is, then these kind of align and you can start making new things. And I think when building habits, it kicks into a very identity part of us.
I also think, people discount evolution's importance in their life, right? You learn it in science. Some people, have different ideas about evolution, and but I'm a scientist, and so I believe the truth in evolution. But most people, they learn it in school and then they forget about it. They don't remember what survival of the fittest means. And I think people don't think about evolution because they don't connect it. It's like, oh, that happened in the past.
Yeah.
Well, people need to realize that how it does affect them in their life now because of how differently we're living. And
more than ever, even.
Now more than ever. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that people can find not only this connection to the past, but also realize that evolution just isn't a history lesson. It actually applies to our modern life and how we can thrive in the modern world. Yeah,
beautiful. If anyone wants to know more about your work, On Origin of Being is your book, your website.
So our website is just www.ontheoriginofbeing.com. On Instagram, I'm at On the Origin of Being. You can find me on all those places.
Thank you, Jenny, for being here.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for being here. You could have been listening to anything, but you're here interested in reclaiming your health. I hope you found the episode useful and constructive. If you enjoyed it and would like to show support for the show, please leave a review, as this makes my content more discoverable for other people to enjoy and learn from. Please also consider subscribing to the show on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever you enjoy listening. Finally, the best way to show support for the show is by sharing it with someone who you think might benefit from it. Thanks for listening, be well, and I'll catch you next time.